Hi everyone, it's Guillaume from Startup Basecamp. Welcome to the Tech for Climate podcast. During the show, you will have the opportunity to meet the best climate tech founders, investors, and experts from both Silicon Valley and around the globe. They will share with you their stories and personal journeys into this growing and exciting industry, giving you some insight into the ecosystems that help you to take part in the fight against climate change and benefit from the opportunities it can represent. The podcast is divided in two small interviews. So in the first part, you will get to know our speakers, their perspectives on the climate crisis and how climate tech is changing the game. The second part of the discussion will be for members of our community who will learn the speakers' secret sauce on how to and share with you their unique expertise on topics such as fundraising, management, strategy, and so on, to help you to become a better leader in your field. So before we start, I would like to quickly share what we are doing at Startup Basecamp to support climate tech founders in accessing resources and gaining visibility with investors they seek. Our initiatives include a membership-based community platform offering access to a dedicated Slack group with a growing number of founders, experts, and investors from around the world, and a series of exclusive content such as interviews, weekly job listings, events, and our quarterly online pitch night opportunity. But more than a place where you can learn, exchange, and grow, we are building a matchmaking service to facilitate connections between our members and top investors and experts in the field. And soon, alongside with other top investors, we will be launching a small fund to co-invest in the growth and acceleration of our members. Finally, all of this is possible because of your support and donations. We are a small self-funded team, and we want you to be part of this collective movement against climate change. So please share one episode with a friend and subscribe to the channels. As an added bonus, we will plant a tree for each of our subscribers each time we reach 1,000 new fans or donors. Do not hesitate to connect with me via social media or email guillaume@startupbasecamp. Thanks a lot for listening. I hope to get in touch with you soon. And now, let's go for the show. Hi everyone, in today's episode, we will speak with 50 years VC Chief of Staff Alex Teng about their seeds funds support for technology entrepreneurs solving the world's biggest problems. The firm based out of San Francisco was co-founded in 2016 by two serial entrepreneurs and YC alumni, Madej and Seth Bannon, who have invested in a vast range of highly impactful founders with big dreams and bold strategies, such as Noya, that you can find on episode 16, for Tech for Climate, Solugen, or Upside Foods. I was excited to have Alex and his high energy on the show to learn more about his unique story that started as a Caltech student in a flying labs operated by NASA while studying climate change, and led him to join 50 years to support portfolio companies and investment decisions with his deep science background. During the show, Alex will give greater detail into their investment thesis, how they support founders, and how they calculate impact to drive their investment decisions. Finally, he will highlight underdog areas in climate tech in which he sees exciting potential for investment and growth. In the second part of the show, Alex will share his secret sauce that can increase your odds to fundraise successfully. You will learn some key red flags that make investors pass on deals. Finally, you will get a few valuable tips on work-life balance for founders and investors. Alex, welcome to the show. Hi, Alex. Welcome to the Tech for Climate podcast. We are super happy and excited to have you here with us today. So before we start,
thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And it's been a long time. I mean, we spoke before, and I really loved your energy and what you do with 50 years VC. So I think this is like the best time for you to tell us a little bit, like maybe give us like a 30-second introduction about 50 year VC.
Yeah, absolutely. So 50 Years exists to back heroes. We partner with founders who are trying to solve the world's biggest problems through technology entrepreneurship. So companies like Upside Food that are culturing meat to eat, Solugen, which is like engineering enzymes to produce industrial chemicals sustainably, or Astronis, which is using small satellites to cover the Earth and internet. And so we partner with founders at the pre-seed seed stage, and we like to say we're founders first organization. So we're founders through and through. Everyone on the team has founded companies. Some of us have scaled those companies, some of us wound them down, we aim to be the most helpful people who back companies ever. And so that's sort of the goal of the mission of 50 years. We take it as a badge of honor anytime our day is filled up with supporting our founders in our portfolio companies.
So let's start from the top. Can you tell us a bit more about you, your story, background? We also like to know a little bit about like anything specific that is not public about you that you like to do, you don't like. I mean, who is Alex?
Yeah. I think one of the coolest facts that no one knows about me is I once threw up over $1 million worth of scientific instrumentation while sitting on a flying laboratory operated by NASA. It was over the Houston area, and we had done hours and hours in the boundary layer, so flying like 1,000 feet above the ground, which is super hot, super bumpy. And as we were doing spirals up, I threw up all over our custom-made $1 million scientific instrument, and immediately the techs came by and pulled me away, because one of the main concerns on that plane is there are no parachutes, and so if you add water to electronics, they tend to light on fire. And then everyone on the plane asphyxiates. So that is like my coolest sort of claim to fame in my graduate school of research, where I was doing climate change research. And I mean, the whole reason I was doing it is that research was I was a grad student in Caltech, and the reason I was a grad student in Caltech is because I really believe that at the time that humanity, and still believe that humanity is flying off a cliff without knowing it. And so I really wanted to get deep down into sort of global climate models to sort of lower the uncertainties of future forecasting. And so I picked a lab where I could do that research and try and constrain sort of ozone production. It's one of the top 5 greenhouse gases, and it's like a very interesting molecule. And only sort of like any one ozone molecule's lifetime in the sort of air during daytime is only like 10 minutes. And so it's like very much dependent on local concentrations and the chemistry. And so there's some mysteries about ozone production that I was trying to solve. And my theory for change, why I went to grad school, was that we would solve climate change like we solved the ozone hole, which was a whole bunch of scientists convening at the UN, sharing the scientific certainty that we're all doomed, and man, wouldn't it be great if we just stopped emitting carbon dioxide. It was probably halfway through grad school I realized that is totally the wrong theory of change. And it dawned on me actually while I was still on the plane. We had another project where I was landing at this small island, Ascension Island. It's between sort of the coasts of South America and Africa, so right in the middle of the ocean, 2,000 kilometers away from the nearest sort of coastline. And we landed in smoke, and the scientists got super excited. This is kind of a novel finding. In the models, smoke really shouldn't last more than a couple hundred kilometers, but we had this thin layer of smoke that sort of persisted across the ocean. And so everyone was super excited because now we get to do the models. There's this is has some impact and import into how we forecast. And in the back of my mind, I was looking out the window, and the sense of dread came over me, and I was like, wow, it's great that we found this new scientific thing, but man, this is not going to help stop people driving cars in LA emitting carbon dioxide all day, or refineries that are just processing billions and billions of tons of barrels of oil, and then they just end up again in the sky. And I was like, it dawned on me the way we stop climate change is basically we stop emitting carbon dioxide, and we've known that for the last 40 years. And the reason we punted on doing it, the reason we did not the U.S. didn't sign an accord to limit its carbon dioxide emissions, is it's just too expensive. And so after I had that realization, I was like, okay, I just got to get out of grad school. I got to go scale up new solutions that are cost effective to mitigate climate change. And so then I worked for 4 years at a startup that was trying to make net zero emission vehicles using 3D metal printing and new manufacturing technologies. And then eventually found my way to 50 years.
So would you consider that as the aha moment? I mean, this driver that helped you to jump into the climate tech side out of the scientist side? Or?
Yeah, so the thing that really made me jump into climate was meeting my father-in-law in Taiwan. I had taken a year off between sort of undergrad and I didn't really know what I was doing, and so I went back to Taiwan, which is where my family's from. And I met my father-in-law. I also fell in love in Taiwan. Separate story. But basically, like, he was just sharing his story. I was just like curious about like how he grew up. Like, Taiwan's a super interesting place. It's like one of the it's a democracy. It's a flourishing, sort of vibrant, very like modern place. And so I just asked him about his life, and he was sharing with me that he grew up essentially like on a dirt floor. Like he told me stories about in middle school how they were so poor that he would grab trash bags to act as shoes so he could walk to school. And like hearing those stories and then looking like outside the window at modern Taiwan, which is like, there's like 7-Elevens on every corner. Like, it's like super convenient place. There's like great food everywhere. Like, air conditioning, all that. It's like one of the best places to live. And like that juxtaposition of like within my father-in-law's lifetime, they went from like this like almost agrarian economy to like this modern industrial economy. Like it imprinted on me this notion that like change can happen fast. Like I grown up in America, and like even to this day, if I go back to my like where I grew up, like it still looks all the same, right? And so like there's like an American complacency, like sort of like we believe the future will probably look a lot like the past. And so like seeing this story of Taiwan and realizing like, wow, like this economy like massively industrialized within like 30, 40 years, and then realizing like, oh man, China is doing the exact same thing for 1 billion people. Like I was like, this scale and scope of change like really like cemented to me that like climate change is probably going to be like a much bigger deal, that we really are flying off a cliff without knowing it. And that almost like in some sense to stop economic progress is like we don't have like the moral authority to tell 1 billion people like they need to remain poor. And so like we really have to figure out new ways to like offer economic prosperity without, for lack of a better word, fucking up the planet. And so like, yeah, I mean, that was probably like the main driver into climate for me.
Like Chris, like I would say, like it's time to stop to unfuck or to unfuck the planet. That's for sure. And we probably will beep that. But let's zoom out a little bit and can you give us a little bit more your overview, I would say, about the climate tech ecosystem today? I mean, where are we at? This is really like becoming the last, I feel like 2-3 years, this climate tech term popped up, starting to get really busy. I mean, what do you think that needs to happen to have, in a way, the climate tech ecosystem was like really carrying and pushing and empowering those founders and this innovation to go full steam to really support? And as we know, tech is not the only way to I would say fight climate change. It's a way to contribute to it. I think there's like other interesting ways to do it, but really like on the tech side and the climate tech side, where and how do you think like we'll reach this full steam capacity? What is blocking it to really reach that, if anything?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think like if I were to think about the ecosystem right now, like I think it's evolved since like sort of like climate tech 1.0 that happened in like the, mid to 2000s. And like really what's going on now is what I almost term like the great carbon economy refactor. And essentially that like, the last century has been powered by oil. And now we know we can no longer use oil as the fundamental input into our society to power prosperity. And so now we have to reimagine all of the inputs into our economy from the earth. And they're going to be different inputs. They're going to be like sugar and carbon dioxide and plants, much more so than oil. And so because the inputs change, then all of the processes that get us to the atoms of our lives are also changing. And so what I see now in the climate tech ecosystem is almost like startups approaching every single input and every single process to try and get us to sort of a modern day economy that's free of sort of the carbon dioxide emissions. And so like, I think that's like an amazing sort of flourishing that's going on. There's a lot of entrepreneurial energy, probably partly driven by like Biden being elected. And then also like things like, like BlackRock's letters telling companies like, if you don't have a sustainability strategy, like I'm not gonna like, no, you're gonna be capital starved or whatever, right? Whatever the language is there. And so like, I think there's a lot of energy and innovation going on in the ecosystem overall. And it's very like sort of tackling all of these minutia problems. I think that like you're seeing the refactoring occur fastest with companies that are better, faster, cheaper in sort of like leveraging new technologies to do things in a carbon-free way that are, just like better. And so like you see a lot of like synthetic biology startups where like, oh, okay, like the economics are totally switched from like traditionally taking oil to make plastic, let's say, or sort of like fine specialty chemicals. And so like those companies have already unlocked sort of like scale because they're cheaper, because like they passed the Mr. Burns test, like, you know, which is like sort of like a greedy capitalist who doesn't care at all about the environment would still like do those things. And so those companies like Solugen, you know, like they're just unlocking. And I think the thing that's holding a lot of us back from sort of like the greater economy from like refactoring totally is if you look at like sort of like the negative emissions sort of part of climate tech, that's a part of the great refactoring that's really held back by essentially like a lack of regulatory funding mechanism to essentially take the carbon dioxide out of the air, and then almost like by definition you have to like fund this process where you turn it into nothing useful. Like if it were useful, like if we turn the carbon dioxide into some useful fuel like product, like it would probably just get burned again, right? Or like we turn it into furniture, it might just get burned again. And so like we literally need to find a funding mechanism to like turn it into like this thing where like it's just this inert like you know, just deep in the ground, right? And like so in that world, like I think people are seeing that in the future we will have like this global carbon market regulatory funding mechanism where like you can get connected in and then get funding to basically take CO2 out of the air. But like the transition between, you know, where we are now and that point is one where it's a little messy, and like companies are you know, are being bolstered by early corporate commitments to get early funding, but still like that's not enough necessarily to like show funding all the way through to that future where, you know, there will be some carbon market where we are gonna really avoid massive disaster. One hopes.
For sure. So let's go a little bit more specific about 50 years. I mean, can you tell us a bit more like the story? You know, what's the thesis that you guys have behind it, and in a way, what do you also offer to founders in your portfolio that maybe others don't? You know.
Yep, absolutely. So the firm was founded by Seth and Ella in 2015, and like I think Ella at the time was a venture capitalist in Poland, and she was finding that like, you know, like the big thing there was like, you know, everyone knew that software companies were sort of eating the world, and so like, you know, like it was all about sort of you know, finding those types of people to back, and but she found the most interesting conversation she was having was with like these deep tech founders, and like it was like always like this thing where like you like really want to help them, but you know that like they don't really fit the model of like a software sort of venture capital fund, like, you know, they're gonna scale like really fast because, you know, there's a lot more like capital intensity to like prove out the technology and then like scale it, right? Because you got to pay for like factories and things like that. And so like then Ella just basically decided like but those are like really the most interesting problems, and like if we want the world to be better, like we just need to go like fund those and back those companies. And like if you looked at the world of venture sort of like of capital at that time, like you could find sort of impact investors, quote unquote, in like New York who had no idea how to scale companies, but could provide you capital. Or you could go to like Sand Hill Road where like they knew how to scale companies, but, you know, they don't really care about the mission and the vision of like impacting the world in a positive way. And so like the firm was sort of founded to be both sort of values aligned, value add investors. Like that's like sort of what it is. And sort of the thesis of the fund is software is basically all the low hanging fruit's been picked. And so like returns are there's a lot of capital chasing sort of like decreasing returns. There's low barriers to entry in software. So like any good idea has dozens of copycats. And at the same time, it's never been easier to start a deep tech company. So like there's dropping costs for genome sequencing, you know, it's like $3 billion 20 years ago, now it's $500 a day. You have like cheap and accurate gene editing via CRISPR, or like shared wet labs, or dropping costs of microelectronics. Like our cell phones have like made like like cameras super cheap. There's advancements in microfluidics. And so like for all of these reasons, deep tech is like on this trend where like, yeah, it's just cheaper and cheaper to start new companies. And additionally, there's also some notion that like it's like the investor ecosystem has a difficult time dealing with deep tech. It just requires like an extra level of diligence. You really need to like understand it. You can't do like the simple pattern matching of like, what are your SaaS metrics to understand like what's going to be the next breakout hit. And so that's sort of like the idea, like the thesis behind 50 years is we want to back those companies that are deep tech and have huge impact on the world and will scale to be huge. And And so like, as part of that, we try and just be really helpful. And so like our tagline is never annoying, always available, and we'll probably help with everything except the tech. And like, so like the always available, never annoying part is like, we remember as founders how annoying some investors can be. Like they're constantly asking for updates. They have like, like whatever things that they're just like bugging people about. And so like, we just fundamentally just want to be as helpful as possible. And part of that is just like, we want to help on the terms that the founders set. And then like how we help, it's just like whatever we can. We'll help with obviously helping like fundraise for companies. That's like a basic requirement of a lot of deep tech companies is you just need additional capital before you really get to that product market or technology market fit. And so, like some of the unique ways, like I recently, like a month and a half ago, was like just wrenching on a direct air carbon capture plant at Noya's sort of like first pilot plant, or we help with deck feedback, just basic stuff. Like, how do we scale this company? What can we, how do we unlock the next phase of growth for our portfolio companies?
So I think this is a good segue. Can you give us like maybe some example of previous investment? I think you just mentioned in Noya, and that's that Josh who introduced us. He was on the show a few episodes ago, and super exciting. And I think they're doing like an amazing job. I think they recently grow the company again to the next step. So that's super exciting. So do you have any other like example of like previous investments? And what makes them special is like the team, the market, the tech. And maybe how do you source them? Like, how do you find those founders that come to pitch you? Do they come to you, or you scout them? How does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So a great example is Solugen of a previous company we've backed. They are sort of building the world's first carbon negative molecule factory. And so they do that through like sort of chemoenzymatic synthesis of chemicals. And basically they're leveraging synthetic biology and enzymes that are sort of like, they can engineer much faster now through those tools, and combining it with sort of the best of like the oil and gas traditional chemical manufacturing processes to create this like behemoth where they take basically sugar, air, and CO2 to remake all the chemicals that make up sort of our modern economy. And so using that sort of their technology, they can address 90% of the chemicals that are currently made globally. And like they've created this like crazy, like fast flywheel effect where basically like they can scale from like microliter well plates to 40,000 liter reactors within months, not years. And then the other sort of crazy part about Solugen is like the fact that they are like have already turned on their plant. So like they're building a plant that's 10,000 tons per year of production. And so like when we first met them, they were like this crazy scrappy team of like they had like built a pilot reactor for their first chemical, which is hydrogen peroxide, from like hardware at Home Depot that they picked up. And then like the thing that like sort of amazed us was like the scrappiness with which they were able to sort of sell that initial hydrogen peroxide. They have like they initially started targeting like a pool cleaners, because like they need hydrogen peroxide to clean their pools. And so like it was like great, easy to sell to them, and they could sell at a profit. And then the other like sort of crazy scrappy thing that they did to sort of like as they scaled sort of their production capacity, they were always constantly selling out. And the reason they were selling out for hydrogen peroxide is they actually ended up creating sort of like their own sustainable brand of wipes. So they like took their hydrogen peroxide and made these wipes, and then just could sell them at a premium into the market. And so like actually like booked revenue from selling that. And like it was just like a crazy like scrappy, like you generally don't think of like these deep tech like chemical factories as being like able to generate revenue through sort of like that pilot phase where they're really proving out the technology and sort of almost subscale on the sort of economics. Another example was
sorry to interrupt, but what make them this? I hear the tech looks like incredible, the team, but to you guys, when you are selecting like a company and decide to invest, what are the 1, 2, or 3 different criteria that you really look to and say, okay, that's check, that's check, that check? Is that the team, the market, the tech? How do you process and make your mind around it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So like there's three main criteria that we look for. The first is impact. And so we want to see that if the founder's vision is realized, that it will transform millions, if not billions of lives for the better. And so like one way we think about that framework is like, does it make a serious dent in one of the United Nations SDG goals? That's like a framework that we use for impact. The other thing is we look for a company that's deep tech. And so essentially, does it take a PhD to start? Does it require deep esoteric knowledge of the field? Are they a team basically that's 1 of 10 in the world that could conceivably tackle that problem? And then the final thing is, can it have a path to a potential $1 billion a year in revenue? And so for all three of those things, it was like a check mark box, yes, for Solugen. And in addition, like, you know, we have heuristics around the team. One of them is like, would we work for these founders? Like ourselves, like when we hear them talk about their vision, their passion, what their plan is, like, would we want to work for them ourselves? And that's actually like a really high bar, right? I mean, like you think about like what that really means, like leaving this like amazing job where I'm feeling super fulfilled, like I would actually go grind it out with them. And so that's one of like the top level heuristics for the team. You know, do they have clear thinking? Are they first principles thinkers? Are they charismatic? Can they attract a team? Can they build a team? One of the other things we think about with the team is like growth mindset. You know, no founder starts off knowing how to operate and have all the skills to operate $1 billion company. And so like, you just got to be greedy and hungry for that like self-improvement and new knowledge that you need to scale your company. And we probably over-index a lot on the team at 50 years, just because we back companies so early. We always know that like, you're going to meet the market and you're going to have to shift. It's almost like we use this analogy where like your startup's like a sandcastle with the waves constantly crashing over, and the founders are the ones sort of like rebuilding the sandcastle as you go. And so like often the plan will change, right? And so like we're really trying to back the founders in their vision. And so yeah, that's like
I like this analogy of the sandcastle. I mean, I was more using the building a plane while you are flying it, but I think the sandcastle makes even more sense. Thanks for sharing that. So where do you find those founders? Like, how do you source them? Like, what's your secret sauce?
Yeah. I mean, like one of the things we do is we love sort of helping academics translate their ideas into the real world. I mean, like fundamentally, like science is the engine of prosperity. And so like we actually run programs where we try and actively improve the ecosystem of entrepreneurship for academics. So like we've run a program before where, we identified this need where like we really need more PhDs in venture capital because they can help diligence and help support sort of deep tech founders. And so we actually ran a program where we tried to teach PhDs to found, to venture capitalists. Like, how does that ecosystem work? And in doing so, like, they're already sort of well connected, sort of in their labs, and so like then they would just sort of like bring up like these potentially amazing companies that we could partner with. The other thing we currently run is also like a community of entrepreneurial scientists. If you're an entrepreneurial scientist right now in a lab, it's hard to find another entrepreneurial scientist. And we know that just like from our founders, like having a community that you can rely on, that you can learn from, that you can share with and grow with is like really key to like sustaining some of the energy that you need to grow your company. And so like as an entrepreneurial scientist, like the odds of them having another one in your lab, very low. And like being able to find another one in a different lab, also very low. And so like just being able to have that connective tissue with them, we hope also helps people spin out, you learn these playbooks and things from each other, but also like, it allows us to meet these folks early on in their journeys. And that's probably like the most fun we have is like when we can jam with people at the very early stages on their idea and concept and help them really, really spin out their company.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that. So according to you and based on your knowledge of the ecosystem today and the market, I mean, which sector are the most promising for you today in terms of like what I call impact cash return or ICR, meaning like building impactful companies while creating, highly profitable business?
Yeah. I think the world is sleeping on, like, I wish there was more entrepreneurial energy in heating and cooling. Like, I think it's like a very, like, people think of it as like a very boring sort of like, it's just an air conditioner, like I turn it on. But like 40% of final energy is consumed in buildings. And like, if you even look at like just commercial buildings, like 40% of that energy is just heating and cooling. And like fundamentally, like as like a scientist, you look at the thermodynamics of some of what we're doing and it's just so wasteful. So one example is in lab, lab air. You take hot air from outside, you cool it down, and then you also have to dehumidify it, right? because it's like, it's, you cool it down and you don't want to blow like 100% humid air into a lab. It like makes things wet and like it's very uncomfortable, clammy for everybody. And then so like you spend all that energy to cool it and dehumidify it, and you put it in the lab, and then you just keep doing that, right? And then what happens to the cold air in the lab? You just put it back outside. Like you literally, like all of that cold air that goes back outside, like once passed through the lab, like it's wasted energy. Like you just lost like 70-80% of your energy, and like you could have used it to like help cool the incoming air, but like we don't. Or like the other great example I like to look at is like my wife's from Taiwan, and so like there's air conditioners sort of everywhere. It's a hot and humid place, and like you see this like stream of water that comes out of almost all air conditioners, because again, you're gonna dehumidify the air. And you look at all that, like we just spent so much energy turning that water vapor into liquid water, and now it's just like this waste stream that everyone has to deal with. Like you literally need to like pipe it out into like a sewer, and it's like it boggles the mind that like how much energy we waste in heating and cooling. And so like they're like fundamentally just better ways enabled almost by like new materials where we can like sort of manipulate and use much lower energetic pathways to like dehumidify air or like do the combined cycle of dehumidification and cooling. I think that sector is like just going to blow up. And like from a fundamental needs perspective, like there are whole swaths of the planet that will become unworkable without air conditioning, right? Like as the sort of earth heats up, like there are these places like India and Pakistan and Bangladesh where like you just can't work over a certain temperature. Like you just kind of just have to lay down. And so like we know that like we need like massively scaled air conditioning to meet sort of to sort of be able to live and operate. And so like we have to find new and better ways to do heating and cooling. I'll give you another example. One of the things with heating is like we think of heating as like very solved problem, like it's 100%, like 99.9% efficient, like natural gas burners in a lot of our houses. But like again, like it boggles my mind. Like yeah, it is 99% efficient, but like we have heat pumps. And so like rather than like being 100% of harvesting all that energy from burning something, we could actually have this system where like we actually have lower energy to just move the heat around into your house from somewhere else. And like we just like again, like I just think like that impacts plus cash return just on like the fundamental principles of how much energy goes to heat and cooling. Like yeah, there's like a huge overlooked markets, a whole bunch of markets there.
Definitely, that's a big one. And any other one that you see on the side that also bring your attention on?
Yeah, I think materials. I think our ability to manipulate atoms at a very level, like at a very fundamental level, creates sort of like this amazing thing. Like so, if you look at like MOS, metallic organic frameworks, like we're able to pattern these things very regularly where like you can have a hole that's basically the exact shape and size of another molecule. And so like that molecule just wants to go in, and then it's easy to release as well. And so like the sort of like advances in that sort of material control of at an atomic level will lead to huge sort of like much more efficient like purification technologies and much more efficient sort of like, again, like back to heating and cooling. And I actually like probably bleed into a whole bunch of other things. Like it'll just increase the ability for certain things to last longer, like maybe being able to coat with like this super hard material. And so I think like that innovation will bleed into a whole bunch of places. And like if you can find those technologies that are ripe to sort of commercialize now, like that's huge impact. And it's a little bit harder to characterize just because some of these materials can be used in such multifunctional ways. But yeah, I think that also is like just a crazy sort of sector.
So in terms of impact, I mean, you mentioned based on your thesis, it's definitely something that you guys are looking at. But can you go a little bit more detail about that? I mean, do you have any like specific process or framework besides the ESG from the UN in itself? Like, I mean, you mentioned you have this community of scientists and experts like to validate the tech in a way. Do they validate also like impact? Do you use them? I mean, how do you guys like assess the real impact? And it's not like a greenwashing day. It's a climate thing that some companies does sometimes. And I believe that we don't have that much time nowadays to invest in companies that claim that they're doing something, but in fact the impact is not there. So how do you guys assess that? And what's the weight in a way in terms of impact, in terms of the investment decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the ways that impact can be measured scientifically, you just ask the founder, like, well, have you thought about like how to measure these things? And so like for carbon, it's pretty easy. Just ask for a life cycle analysis, and then you interrogate the life cycle analysis. You just look at the assumptions. How far do the assumptions have to go before like the impact breaks? And like, you can get sort of other sort of scientists like pilot, like sort of help you assess that if you don't understand some, like if I don't understand some of the assumptions. But generally, like it's pretty straightforward, and like you look for like almost like a margin of safety, like that the impact is really large. And so like if the assumptions, some of them are not as like not as conservative as they like, then you still have that. I think that so like we look for places where the impact is huge and it's sort of like well settled that there is positive impact there. It's just sort of the short answer. I think one of the interesting sort of metrics we often use is like we like to see that the revenue and impact are 1-to-1 in a business. And so essentially, like, no matter how the company scales and whatever markets they approach, we just generally believe that's like tied together. And so then like you can also sort of, because we partner so early on, we can sort of like know that as the company grows, it will always be like positive impact for the world.
And the companies that you guys are investing in are like always focused greenhouse gas emission reduction or impact on that sense, or is impact also social impact, or is it like impact in terms of like, I mean, I would say like natural environment, protection or regeneration, or what kind of impact is the most like focused for 50 years?
We don't. Yeah, we're kind of a generalist. So like, if we believe it's one of the world's biggest problems, we'll back them. And like, I like in that sense, like sometimes it's just literally the founder's vision. Like they really believe it's a difficult, like one of the biggest problems. And when we think about it, do we agree? And if so, then like great, like that's it. Like that's like it's as simple as that sort of. So yeah, we try not to overcomplicate it. We also believe that like sometimes like asking for metrics really early on about impact. Like impact reporting or ESG reporting can be pretty burdensome to a startup. Like as a startup, like you just like the main thing is just survive and grow, right? And like asking for this additional thing that doesn't help you survive and doesn't help you grow, like it can be burdensome. Yeah, and so that's the other thing we sort of wait on.
Okay, so I mean, you and me, we all hear the news, and especially when you work in climate tech, you keep hearing even more, being targeted with like news about climate change and like this all like crazy world that is like at our doorsteps. I mean, are we doomed? What would you tell to anyone who's not part of the climate tech? Like, what's our future? Like, do you see hope? Not? What's your opinion on that?
I always see hope. I mean, I think it's a human engineered problem, and we have scaled these technologies ridiculously fast. And so we also have can invent the tools that will solve it. And so like for me, like I just like, yeah, that's like just fundamentally like what I think. And so like, I mean, part of it is just finding ways where we can co-opt capitalism in the pursuit of solving these large problems, because oftentimes capitalism leaves out these externalities that like, like about climate change, like we don't make people pay for CO2 emissions that they create. And so like, I think, yeah, I have a lot of hope because it's all sort of human problems and we can find human solutions.
That's good. So how can the community of listeners can help you today?
I joined the system, join climate tech companies. So like, I don't know, like I always think of like, just how can I help the ecosystem? So like, if anyone's got ideas on how I can help the ecosystem, let me know. Cause that's how I want to, most profitably spend my time, is helping the world, solve these big problems.
So any question that I should have asked you and I did not?
I can't think of any. I think one of the great things about sort of communication strategies is emojis. I love emojis. So maybe like that's a question. Like, do you like using emojis? And the answer would be yes. And I think it's a great communication tool to convey emotion and energy.
Fantastic, Alex. I love your energy. So thank you so much for sharing all of those super insightful, information about the ecosystem, about what you guys do, how do you measure impact, where you see that, there's like those hidden nuggets like heating, cooling. That's probably something that other investors or other founders should look at. Hi, it's Guillaume again. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. As I said, do not hesitate to share an episode with a friend. Also, if you value the work we do for the climate tech ecosystem, here is how you can contribute to it. Today, I'm asking for your support and a donation or sponsorship to make the work of our self-funded team more viable. Even a small contribution means a lot to us. In any case, I will invite you to subscribe to our channels and visit our website startupbasecamp.org to discover more episodes like this one and get your membership to access all our members' exclusive content. So remember, all of this is possible because of your support and donation. And we want you to be part of this collective movement against climate change. Let's keep in touch, and I hope you will enjoy our next show with us.